Hey everyone, I'm Amethescent, and welcome to my third FNAF fan game devlog. And before I get into anything, I have to apologize. Because in my last video, I said this. In a few months, I plan to get a demo out that you all can play. And since then, it's been almost 6 months. The biggest reason why is due to school and other things eating up a lot of my time. At this point, I am not yet ready to release the demo, but as I was editing my recent shorts, I realized that I have a lot of content for my devlogs. Way too much to fit into one devlog without it being at least an hour long. So I know I said the demo would be out with this devlog, but it's not. Yet. And I'll tell you more about how much I have left to do at the end of this devlog. At the end of my last devlog, I presented a list of goals I wanted to achieve for this video, which I did not complete entirely. And not everything that I've done so far will be in this video, but in the next devlog I make, whenever that will be. The first thing I did was begin modeling the establishment. I decided to start with this mostly because I wanted a break from all the coding I had just been doing. Both coding and modeling are fun for me, but only one of those sometimes results in me spending several hours just trying to get one thing to work. And modeling simple objects is a lot easier and simpler than modeling full characters. So it's very easy to just turn off my brain and model. The first step was to import the blockout from the last video into Blender. At first, it didn't work since it wasn't just the blockout that I added, but also cameras and other functionalities. So I had to remove anything that wasn't strictly a model and export that to Blender. And after I was done with that, I went out of Blender and into Milanote to create a mood board for all the different rooms. Because I'm not all that experienced in designing buildings. Back into Blender, I separated everything into 3 collections, which are basically folders. One for my untouched models, one for my in-progress models, and one for my finished models. The models that were untouched, I applied a see-through purple material to them so it was easier to tell what was what. The office is undoubtedly the most important room in the entire building, as it is the room the player will likely be forced to stare at for the majority of the game. So that was the first room I worked on. The doors and buttons were not things I needed to really worry about. The shapes were fine as is, and since these are parts of the game that can move and be interacted with, it's better to do any modeling or texturing for them in a separate project. Next was the desk, computer, and anything else that would go on an office desk. Also in the office, I added a few cabinets, a trash can, and trash. There was also this plush version of Chester that I made months and months ago that I put on top of the computer. Cute, right? After the office, I worked my way from the front of the building to the back, starting with the entrance and the party rooms. The entrance includes a reception desk with the word welcome on it, Chester-themed trash cans, shelves, cabinets, and rope fences. The party rooms needed tables, chairs, arcade machines, cups, plates, and balloons. And since Chester's party room is pretty similar to Penny's, I could just reuse all of those assets. And it's a similar deal with the bathrooms. There are some differences between a men's bathroom and a women's bathroom, but it's mostly the same. And after doing the rest of the rooms, the only thing left to model for the building were the cameras. In a typical FNAF game, you never see the cameras because you're always looking through them. But since mine has a free roam section, the cameras will be very much visible. Once I was finished modeling the building, I still wasn't ready to get back into any coding, so I turned to modeling Penny instead. The good thing about my animatronics designs is that they are pretty similar. So for Penny, I can reuse a lot of Chester's model. And that's exactly what I did. I started with her endoskeleton, or rather Chester's endoskeleton. I kept basically everything, only really needing to change the tail, eyes, ears, and colors of the joints. The tail was just a matter of deleting the extra segments, and I just needed to add eyelashes to the eyes. The color changes were a quick switch from blues to pinks, but the ears were the one thing I did have to remodel a bit. But even that didn't take too long. The exoskeleton, however, did take a bit longer. Once again, I reused Chester's exoskeleton. Similarly to before, I only really had to worry about the tail, ears, head, and all the colors. The colors were mostly easy, but Penny's design is more complicated in that area. Several of her limbs have unique patterns, and her face specifically had a lot going on. I had to learn a new way of adding textures to my models. Previously, I would draw a texture, import it into Blender, and fiddle around with it for who knows how long to get it to look right. But it turns out you can download a version of the blank textures with all the faces and vertices on it. This makes it easier because I can actually see where all the features are in my drawing program. Most of the rest of it was easy, but I did have to remodel a lot of the head and ears. I'm really happy with the result. I think she looks really cool. All that was left was to put her into Mixamo to make her do funny dances. I think something went horribly wrong when setting up her model because her arms and ears got kind of messed up, but it made for a good laugh. From that, I went to Chester so I could adjust some things and re-add him into the game. These things that I adjusted, or rather added, are poses. These are different short animations that play depending on where in the map Chester is. I referenced FNAF screenshots for inspiration, but there's only so much you can do with giant, clunky robots. Afterward, I animated his jump scare as well. Don't laugh. I'm not exactly an animator, and I did come back to it a few months later to adjust and change it. Any tips to make it better would be much appreciated though. Originally, I wanted the jump scare animations to play in-game, but now I'm thinking of having it pre-rendered as a video and playing it when the player is jump scared. Having it pre-rendered will definitely make it look better, but it may break immersion a bit. Let me know what you think. Next was adding all that into the game and adjusting the code to accommodate it. It was just adding an extra value to the room pause dictionary that has the name of the animation, as well as making sure that the animation plays when the animatronic is at that position. But after that, I went back to modeling, specifically Ollie. Once again, I began with the endoskeleton. It's a lot of the same things as with Penny and Chester, so I won't bore you with repeating what I already said. Instead, I'll just focus on the things that are different. For one thing, Ollie is decently taller than the rest of the animatronics, as well as lankier. And also, there's the matter of his neck and eyes. For Ollie, I envisioned him having a neck that can extend and retract, and eyes that can turn pitch black. It was just a matter of rigging that into Blender. The neck extensions were done through constraints that limit distance. That way, the different parts of the neck can only go up a certain amount. This doesn't really account for rotation or side-to-side movement, but it still works just fine. The eyes were a little more complicated. I don't exactly remember how I got it to work, as I was mostly following tutorials. And it didn't even really matter in the end, as this ability to change eye color doesn't really translate into Godot, so I had to rebuild it in Godot anyway. Next was the endoskeleton. I reused Chester's model once again and just stretched everything out to fit Ollie's lankier proportions. Then I remodeled the head and feet as well as added wings and breakage to his model. Once I was done with him, I added him to Mixamo, as is tradition. Back into Godot, I set my sights on the camera graphics. In the FNAF games, the cameras have this static overlay that I think adds to the horror experience. So I tried to mimic this by adding a static video in my game. Little did I know that Godot and videos don't get along all that well. No matter what I did, adding the video into the game just resulted in the gameplay being super laggy. So I was really frustrated with this as I tried to get it to work. Eventually I just resorted to importing the video into my Procreate, shortening it to just 5 frames, and exporting that as a sprite sheet. And that ended up working. I didn't love how it looks, but I thought I'd wait until I textured the building before deciding if I needed to change it. Back to Penny, I gave her some poses and imported her into the game. Then I took all the code I wrote for Chester and slapped it onto her. She works pretty much the same way as Chester, just with different positions and poses. And I also exported the models for the building into the game. I was going to wait until I added all the textures, but I kind of wanted to take a break from all the visual stuff and work on the coding, so I just added it in as is. At this point, I was finally ready to go back into the coding portion of game development, so I tackled the issue of jump scares and deaths. There were a few bugs I needed to fix and some tweaks I needed to make. Starting with the bugs, there was one bug where the player dies inconsistently. Sometimes you would get the jump scare animation, but the game wouldn't switch to the death screen. For this, there were two fixes. The first issue was that the animatronics have a kill box. If you enter this kill box, you die. This is only supposed to be effective in free roam though, so I had to change it so that it only works in that mode. The second bug fix was that I simply didn't connect the animation to the code that triggers the player death. Basically, after the animation finishes, it's supposed to trigger code that switches you to the death screen. But that wasn't working. Instead, it would only trigger that death screen if the animatronic's kill box just so happened to hit you during the jump scare. So those two fixes managed to do the trick. Another issue was that the player could still look around while being jump scared. This was pretty simple to fix as I already had a signal that tells other scripts when a jump scare is happening. Then there was also the issue of the animatronics continuing to move into the office, even after they were already inside. I'm not exactly sure if that would cause any issues, but I fixed it anyway, just in case. Now onto the tweaks and adjustments. This was mostly just making the jump scares more FNAF-like. In FNAF, the animatronics don't immediately jump scare you as soon as they get into the office. They simply wait at the door until one of a few different criteria occurs. One criterion is to open the cameras. The second criterion is to be in the cameras when the animatronic enters, then close the cameras. The final criterion is if you stay in the cameras for a certain amount of time while the animatronic is inside. After that amount of time passes, the animatronic forces your cameras down and jump scares you. I aim to imitate that. I did this by adding a few extra steps to the jump scare process. The first step was to not immediately trigger the jump scare when the animatronic enters. Instead, it sets a few variables and emits a signal. Depending on the state the player is in, different things happen. If the player is outside of the cams, the animatronic jams the door that it's in, meaning you can't close it. But not much else happens until you open the cameras. As soon as the cams are open, it starts the jump scare timer. When the jump scare timer goes off, the cams are forced closed and the jump scare happens. If you close the cams before the timer is up, the timer pauses and the jump scare is triggered. After that, I decided to go through all of my old code and refactor some things. You see, I'm not exactly a master coder, so my code isn't always perfect. Around that time, I came across a video called Why You Shouldn't Nest Your Code. Basically, nested code is code that is indented over and over and over again. This is typically done with if statements, and upon looking at my scripts, I saw that I had a lot of nested code. And although code like this works just fine, it can be confusing and hard to understand. So I took it upon myself to denest all of my code using the strategies suggested in the video. If you are a programmer that struggles with nesting, I highly recommend the video as it was really helpful for me. Anyway, I went ahead and spent several hours cleaning up and denesting my code as much as I could for all the scripts except for the player script and the Office UI script. It was a great learning experience. But that's pretty much all. I still have a lot more progress to cover, but I don't want this video to be too long. If you've been keeping up with my recent shorts and posts, you'll have some idea of my progress so far. For one thing, I not only decided to change the mascot of the game from Chester to Penny, but I've also decided to change the format of the name. I changed the mascot because Penny's design is a lot more visually interesting. It doesn't really matter though whether Chester is the mascot or Penny is, because they're both equally important. I've also decided, with the input of my subscribers, to change the name of the game. Instead of the usual format of Five Nights at Penny's, I've decided to go with Penny's Party Place. That name got 83% of the votes on the poll I made, so it's clear that one is preferred. As for my progress, I still have a lot to do, but as of writing this, I'm close to being finished with the biggest things. So I've modeled Stella and have programmed most of the functionality for the free roam animatronics to hunt you. I've also created Stella's unique mechanic, which I'll go over more in the next devlog. I also revamped a few more things, started texturing the building, and more. Most of the mechanics are implemented, so I really just need to focus on the visual and auditory stuff. This includes tweaks to the animatronics, adjusting lighting, creating UI, adding in sound effects, and a bunch of other small stuff. I won't make the same mistake as last time by promising to get a devlog or demo out in a certain amount of time, but I can promise that I will continue working on the game and providing updates. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you're interested in seeing more of my FNAF fan game content. Take care and farewell.